Hey everybody, what's going on? This is Matt, and today we're going to be talking about whether or not learning language is even fun. Let's get started. So I think that for a lot of people, unfortunately, there's this real strong negative association with learning a language, especially for people that are just getting started or want to learn a language. And it's unfortunate because, in my opinion, learning a language is very fun and a very rewarding process. It opens you up to a world, cultures, people that you did not have access to before. And, for a lot of people, that negative association started possibly in school where they learned a foreign language for maybe a year or two. And, especially in those environments, it's very easy to have this negative experience where there's this stress, there's this pressure to perform well on quizzes and tests in this kind of rapid pace of, okay, we're done with this lesson, we're going to move on to the next and forget the rest and remember it for a final. And maybe even for some people, they're really not interested in that language, and so it's just a means to an end of something they have to do. And even then, a lot of the ways that schools kind of do language learning instruction, it's very boring, it's not very effective, and so there's just kind of this drudgery with learning the language. And then once you're kind of done with that and you try to use it in the real world, you find out you're not very competent, not very fluent, don't know much, and it was just kind of this wasted effort. And so you come out of that experience with this idea that, maybe I'm not really good at learning languages. It's boring, it takes a long time, and it's unfortunate because I think that bias, that experience really can get in the way of making a lot of progress in the end of the day. Now, that being said, on the flip side, if you go to YouTube or some other places, there's this, I think, a really super positive tone, and it can be a little deceiving where people are kind of making the claims, get fluent in 21 days, learn a language only through this method. It's easy, do this. And I think that also potentially throws people into traps where, they get really hyped up, they're ready to go, and then they realize it's hard, they don't have the right strategy or goals, and they quit, and it reinforces that negative kind of experience they had prior to that. So that being said, I think that what's really important to remember is, why are people learning languages? Ultimately, it's to interact with the language on a compelling level. And so when people imagine speaking a foreign language or knowing a certain language, whether it's like French or German, they probably imagine speaking with natives in the foreign language or kind of using it on a vacation. Maybe that's reading fiction or certain books or literature in the foreign language, watching movies or podcasts in that foreign language. And that's really where people ultimately want to be. They want to be interacting with that compelling content. And that's really important because, even though people might not tell you, learning languages takes a long time. It takes a lot of effort to get fluent and very competent in a language where you're really not making mistakes, you pretty much understand everything. That takes a long time. And so to make that sustainable, you really want to get to a point where the process is, successful, you're making steady progress, and it's fun as well. Especially that fun part, because that's what makes it sustainable. We want to get to that point where learning language is not a grind. It's not this just burdensome task. And I think for a lot of people, they just try to brute force through it, and in the long run, it's probably not going to work, whether that's they're going to flashcard their way to fluency or just understand the grammar perfectly, go through these beginner books and exercises, and that stuff can be good, but you ultimately want to get to that place where you're interacting with the language on a compelling level and using compelling content to learn. So once you get to the point where you can kind of read in a foreign language, not only are you working on reading comprehension, you're picking up new words, but you're reading something that you want to do. You're doing something fun in the language. And so that's really critical. You want to have a strategy and goals to get to that point. And that's the thing. A lot of people make mistakes before they even get started, where, there's not clearly defined goals. The strategy is not there to kind of get there. And, it's almost like you're doomed from the start. And it's understandable because there's a lot of material out there. There's a lot of content where, if you aren't really experienced with learning a language, it's very easy to get overwhelmed, right? Like, what method do you use? Do you use Duolingo, Pimsleur? And then there's people with their opinions, and there's arguments here, and you decide, oh, I'm just going to go with this method. And it turns out it's not very fun, it's not very effective, and you're back at reinforcing that association. So that's the problem. It can be very overwhelming. And I plan on talking more about some of those strategies and how to kind of go about this process. But I think it was just kind of important to put that out there where, learning a language does not have to be this huge grind. I think it's important to be realistic that it's going to take time and effort, but you can really accomplish a lot of results in a relatively reasonable amount of time where you're reading, you're listening, you're speaking. And there's a lot of things we can do in terms of strategies and goal setting that will help us get there. So learning language can be fun. You just have to kind of believe in that idea and hopefully navigate the waters as best as you can, stick with it, and it can be a very, very, very rewarding adventure. So this has been Matt. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.